So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our side event on Syria, Syria 1 year on, addressing explosive ordnance contamination in a changing context, progress and priorities. My name is Aida Burnett-Cargill, and I'm the Syria Mine Action Area Responsibility Co-Coordinator. And I wanted to give a few opening remarks to this event. So 1 year ago, we stood before you in a similar NDM event and at a moment of a profound change in Syria. A shift in context opened parts of the country that had long been inaccessible, creating both an opportunity and a risk. 1 year on, that opportunity remains, but so does the urgency. Across Syria today, explosive ordnance continues to be one of the most significant protection risks facing civilians. It determines where people can move, whether they can return home, and whether they can rebuild their lives. And over the past year, we have seen a clear pattern. As access for civilians has expanded, so too has exposure. Communities are moving, returning, resettling, pursuing livelihoods, often into areas that are contaminated, unmarked, or in need of a survey. At the same time, renewed conflict activities, environmental factors in parts of Syria have shifted contamination patterns and require additional interventions by the partners. The result is a persistent level of incidents and casualties, mostly linked to everyday activities: farming, grazing, scrap collection, seasonal work. In this context, mine action is not a standalone activity. It is the enabler of everything else. Without it, safe returns cannot happen. Humanitarian access is constrained. Recovery efforts cannot move forward. And yet, despite the scale of needs and despite the capacity that exists, the response has not been able to scale up at pace that is required. What we are seeing is a growing gap between needs and delivery. Not because partners are not ready, they are, but because the conditions to operate at scale are not fully in place yet. Administrative bottlenecks, operational limitations, short-term and unpredictable funding. At the same time, important developments are underway. National structures are emerging. Coordination is evolving, and there is space for both a space and willingness to build something more sustainable. But this transition is happening while needs remain acute. So the question for today is not only where we are, but how we move forward. What has changed in the operational reality? What is still holding the response back? And what needs to shift to enable mine action to operate at a scale that this context demands? This is not a traditional panel. We have framed it as a discussion between partners who are sitting here in the room today as well. And we have partners online as well. Because 1 year on, the opportunity is still here, but so is the urgency. I would therefore like to present the panel, and the panel is not going to be really in the exact order as we are lined up, but today, if we may present Mr. Fadi El-Saleh, who is the director for the Syria National Mine Action Center, Sylvain Leport, who is a country director for Mines Advisory Group. Online, we have Mr. Bakhtiar Hassan, who is the director for the national NGO Reach Out. Christopher Tierney, country director for the Norwegian People's Aid. And Moayen Al-Nafali, deputy country director for the Halo Trust. Welcome. I think maybe as a starter, and I apologize for speaking so much, but hopefully you will soon stop listening to me and hear more from the colleagues here and online. But we needed to present a little bit of the situation as it was and how it currently is. So before December 2024, the mine action response in Syria was structured. However, it was highly fragmented and highly constrained. Coordination existed, but it was fragmented across different geographic areas and hubs. Operational access was limited by front lines, and capacity was constrained in specific parts of the country, particularly in the northeast and to an extent in northwest. So while the sector had technical capacity and experience, it was not able to operate at scale across the country. In simple terms, capacity existed, but access did not equally everywhere. At the same time, what needs to be remembered, the shift in context in 2024. So the change in context that December 2024 fundamentally altered the dynamics. What happened was that front lines collapsed. For example, population movement increased significantly, and access expanded across previously contested areas. However, this also meant that the large number of people moved into areas that were contaminated, unmarked, and not recently assessed. As a result, exposure to explosive ordnance increased sharply, with over 1,000 recorded incidents and more than 2,000 casualties since December 2024. So while access for civilians improved, the risk increased incrementally as well. In a little bit of so since we saw each other last time here in Geneva, significant changes have happened also. A bit of a chronology of what had taken place since we saw you here last time, and we included a few things since December the 8th. So in January 2025, UNMA's director from New York made it to Damascus to meet all partners operating across Syria for the first time. In February, the sector united as one. So previously segregated parts of the country that were united through the whole of Syria finally united and met in Damascus for the first time. In April 2025, Ministry of Emergency and Disaster Management was established. Then in June 2025, the Syria National Mine Action Center was established. In July 2025, the Syria National Mine Action Center, with support of ICRC, holds the first stakeholder workshop, gathers all the partners to map who is working where and what it is that we are doing across Syria. In September 2025, Mine Action AOR and the Geneva Center for International Humanitarian Demining organized a 3-day technical workshop. In January 2026, Syria National Mine Action Center, with support from UNICEF, held a 4-day EORE and VA workshops. And in April, Syria National Mine Action Strategy Workshop was held with support from GICHD, gathering all the different stakeholders, including the ministries. A really, really powerful and excellent event. And in May, we are expecting that we will have a Syria National Mine Action Standards workshop as well. Of course, it would be amiss not to mention the changes that have taken place in northeast Syria in January 2026. The developments in northeast Syria have had also a significant impact on the response. The northeast has historically been the core of mine action response and operations in Syria, with established capacities, systems, and experienced teams. However, changes in the administration and operational environment in early 2026 led to a partial or, in some cases, full pause in operations for several partners due to delays in approvals and permissions. While some progress has been made and activities are gradually resuming, the reality remains uneven. What is important to underline here is that capacity certainly exists. But despite some administrative impediments removed, deployment of all teams is still underway and depends on close coordination with Syria National Mine Action Center and local authorities. Nonetheless, and despite the challenges, mine action partners in Syria have delivered quite significantly over the past year. If we have a look at 2025, more than 4 billion square meters of land have been surveyed. More than 30,000 single items have been destroyed. More than 1 million people have received explosive ordnance risk education. 6.9 million square meters of land was cleared, 322 prosthetics provided, and roughly about 70,000 physical rehabilitation sessions were provided as well. So we have not been standing still. However, the gains remain fragile, and what we are seeing in 2026 is a growing gap between what partners are capable of delivering and what they are able to deliver in practice. This gap is driven by three main factors: administrative, operational, and funding. So, with the support of National Mine Action Center, there has been also a lot of improvements in gaining some of those approvals and some of those permits, so the partners can continue operating. Despite those delays, we have been able to start the restart of operations. In the operational, when it comes to operational constraints, there has been still some uneven access across regions. There has been also the need to resurvey due to shifting contamination patterns. And in terms of funding, there has always been a problem to get more permanent funding for mine action. And the one-year cycle, project cycle, has always been a deterrent and a disadvantage for mine action partners. What are our priorities and what will enable scale-up? Certainly, looking ahead, a few priorities for sure stand out. There is an urgent need to scale up non-technical survey because in Syria, for the moment, we are still not having a picture of full-scale contamination. It is number one priority for Syria. This is especially valid for northern Syria, where contamination patterns have changed. Explosive ordnance disposal, spot tasks, and clearance remain essential to physically remove the threats and enable humanitarian access and recovery. Explosive ordnance risk education, often underestimated and undervalued, remains the first immediate life-saving measure, both for civilians, but also for those operating in contaminated environments. And finally, always neglected and always underfunded, victim assistance must be seen as a long-term commitment, enabling survivors and their communities to fully participate in Syria's economy and Syria's recovery, because they can, if they are given an opportunity. Just to close a little bit with really some of the staggering numbers that we have been seeing in Syria. Since December 8, 2024, 1,081 incidents have taken place with 2,166 casualties. More than 770 people have been killed, and roughly about 1,400 have been injured. These are horrifying numbers. This is only verified casualties and verified incidents. We thank profoundly to the International NGO Safety Organization that has been verifying these numbers for us. We anticipate that the numbers are much, much bigger, actually. These are with INSO's support, these numbers are rigorously verified, and hence they are as they are. Roughly about 60% of all casualties are men, which means that the accidents are very heavily connected to pursuit of livelihoods. The remaining, so roughly about 30% of casualties are children, often attracted by shiny objects during play or during supporting families with livelihoods. Of all of those 1,081 incidents, roughly 758 took place in agricultural land and grazing areas, really strongly connected to the pursuit of livelihoods. The three governorates most exposed remain with the highest number of casualties: Deir ez-Zor, Aleppo, and Idlib. And just to present to you very briefly who the actors are and who are the members of the Mine Action Area of Responsibility, I'm not going to name everybody over there, but as you can see, the membership is very diverse. The core members on the left are the partners that are implementing mine action in Syria. That includes both clearance and survey, while some of the other partners are focusing on more specific pillars of mine action, a lot of EORE, apologies, and separately victim assistance, or one or the other. So with that, I really wanted to shift a little bit the discussion, and we want to examine how has the operational reality changed in the different areas. How was the situation back then, and what are the greatest opportunities to strengthen and scale the response moving forward? And I really wanted to start with the Halo Trust and Muayed, who will speak about the situation in northwest Syria and how things have changed. Over to you, Muayed.
Can you hear me? That's good. Hi, everybody. I am Muayed al-Nofali, the Deputy Country Director for the Halo Trust Syria. Previously, I will talk about the past. We started the operations in Syria in 2017 in the south of Syria, in Daraa specifically, and we closed our office there in 2018 when the Syrian regime, or previous regime, recontrolled the area, and we focused at that time to the north part of Syria. We stayed working in the northwest Syria until 8th of December 2024. It was a highly restricted area, actually, and we were doing risk education, survey, and mine clearance and EOD in that area. Our size was almost 40 staff. After the 8th of December, with the increased access, Halo expanded to cover different governorates. Especially, we returned back to Daraa. We have our south office in Daraa city. The aim of this office to cover Daraa and potentially Sueda when the conditions allows us. And we have a presence in Damascus, small presence in Homs. And we reach out to the resort. We are working in the western side of Al-Furati rivers, and we were asked by the communities there to expand a little bit for the eastern part. As we mentioned before, we were focusing on northwest Syria, where is the highly contaminated area, and our main office or operational office is still there. From that office, we are covering Idlib, Aleppo, Latakia, and northern Hama as well. Our size right now, our program size in Syria, it's almost 40 teams. And we have 250 staff working with Halo Trust.
Muayed, can I ask you really to sort of go back in before the December 2024? How was the operational space? What was Halo at the time able to do, and what were not the possibilities to?
Yeah, definitely. Go back to before the 8th of December 2024. We have a presence in northwest Syria, specifically in Idlib and western part of Aleppo. We were conducting risk education, NTS, and EOD and mine clearance. But we, like as I mentioned, our program size was with 40 staff only. As a highly restricted area, we were unable to expand that much because we couldn't bring the international trainings. At least we were doing everything by ourselves with a remote support from our HQ. So we were doing, but we were facing a lot of problems regarding importing stuff. As you all aware that the demining works need specific or special equipment.
What about the funding situation?
Was as usual, the funding situation, all like not covering Syria, not covering the needs in Syria, We were like having a short-term contracts, especially with the United Nations agencies, which is made us alive, but not sustainable.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you very much. I just wanted to, again, maybe go to Chris Tierney, the country director for Norwegian People Aid, who operated in southern and central Syria. Can you, Chris, please, give us a little bit of a picture of how the operational space was looking in southern and central Syria at the time, and how things have changed?
Thank you very much, Ida. Chris Tierney, Norwegian People's Aid. Prior to the fall of the government, we were heavily restricted in what we could do, and we were operating in Damascus and rural Damascus at that particular point in time. We were having to request for permission to go from one village to the next, and these permissions could take 4 months or more. And it was based on the security situation in the particular area. If it was close to an Air Force base or a military base or a prison, they would have to send intelligence forces out in advance and basically move people out of the area so that we could move in and actually do some work. It was very, very restrictive. Upon the fall of the previous government, it was very shortly after that we were able to get back out on the ground, and we received a very strong welcome, not only from the security forces in the area, but from the populations as well, because they knew we were there to try and help them and to try and make them safe. So it was very important that we got a community buy-in for our return, and from that, and from our non-technical survey teams, we came up with a design that would go sub-district by sub-district. So we wouldn't just come in and do one task in an area, we would do the whole sub-district before we move on to the next sub-district. And that approach, especially when it comes to the non-technical survey and explosive ordnance risk education, has been serving us well up until this time. There was a number of evolving processes that we had to go through. The security forces were basically thrown together. It was 32 different groups that came in under one name overnight with the stroke of a pen by the president, and they still weren't fully cooperating and working together. So we would go to headquarters in Damascus from Ministry of Defence to get permission, or Ministry of Interior, but however, those permissions weren't recognised when we finally got down on the ground. Over the year, that process has evolved, and now they are recognising, and everybody is one signature and one stamp from the appropriate authority is sufficient to enable us to do our work. So there's definitely progress from what we have been doing before. There is a fine balance in our operations that we have to keep, and that is between the political priorities, the humanitarian priorities, and the available funding. To try and explain this a bit more, when it comes to political priorities, it's to get people back into the houses, and they want business. Humanitarian, it's to try and stop people from going into areas that are heavily contaminated, and there are thousands of minefields throughout the country, and try and keep them, the people safe, especially those most at risk, as you will have seen from the slides that Ida put up. And then the funding constraints is how we can spend our money best to achieve the best overall results. There are many people in the country that are unemployed. They want to get on the land. They want to get back into their houses. The construction industry is building up as well, refurbishing, and so there is a lot of economic activity that is building up there. And how do we best support that as an organisation, but as a sector? And this is where it comes to the reconstruction and how we approach how to keep the construction workers safe across the country, especially dealing with the millions of tonnes of rubble. And looking at other international examples from post-World War II, for example, through Europe, we could see that it needs to be embedded as part of the health and safety system within the country under the various different ministries, the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs, the construction ministries, etc., and the various different elements across all the ministerial portfolios that rely on access to land or access to buildings, etc. So to be able to create a system that is sustainable in the country by including health and safety related to mine action for all workers who are in construction industry is something that we are looking forward to in the future. We're just starting the discussions on this now, but it is something at a national level that needs to occur that is very simple to achieve, very cheap, but very effective in reducing the casualties as more and more people start the refurbishment process.
Chris, I absolutely agree, and I think we're going to take up some of those points later in the discussion, but I just wanted to, reverting back to the way that things were before the context change in December, I always love hearing the example from NPA when you were doing clearance and NTS in the Yarmouk camp, how many things you were able to do before the changing context, and how many buildings you were able to address before the changing context, and then how many were you able to do after. I think that's really quite a clear example in terms of access.
Yeah, we started a project in the Yarmouk Palestinian refugee camp in 2024 with funding from the Norwegian government and the government of Japan. It was a very slow process. We managed to clear about 1/8 of the camp area, and this is a like 4-story buildings. It's a suburb of Damascus. A third of it had been completely flattened, a third of it was partially standing, and a third could be reoccupied. In the first 9 months of the project, we had only managed to clear about 1/8 of the area. After the fall of the government, we were able to get back in there and on the ground working, and within 3 months we had completed the rest of the project, which enabled 80,000 people to return to housing units. The number of people that are physically in Yarmouk now is about, the latest figures that we have is around 70,000 people that have moved in that weren't there before. So mine action is capable of enabling returns, and even though people had been through there and looted these areas previously, there was still 1 munition found every 7 buildings that we went into. So there is still a threat out there, even areas that have been picked, you might say.
Thank you, Chris. This is really a fantastic example, and I fully agree. Mine action is a key enabler of everything. I wanted to now go to Sylvain, Country Director for Mine Action, Mines Advisory Group, who has been operating, one of the many partners operating in Northeast Syria. It needs to sort of be mentioned that basically 95% of all operations in Syria before the changing context were taking place in Northeast Syria. So I wanted to get back to you, Sylvain, just to give us a bit of a picture of how things are working at the time before the changing context, and how is it now?
Yeah. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you.
I'm wondering if it's working.
Is it working? Yeah.
Now it is.
Okay. So as you say, now it's been we are at this turning point, I think, in Syria. You've rightly said that for more than a decade now, the northeast of Syria has been the core of mine action. This is where most of the operation took place. This is where system had been established. This is where operators like MAG have heavily invested and trained on staff and equipment. Today, again, the context is changing, and we can see now Syria as a one operational space with access to all governorate. This is obviously a very positive and necessary shift, but as in, it comes with implication. On the bright side of things, we are seeing that we've got a national man action center that is being established, right? A promising entity willing to take the lead, willing to establish a procedure to ensure mine action is properly coordinated and implemented around all governorates. But we also know that this will take time. This is normal. We looked at the timeline you've shared earlier. It's a very recent establishment of this National Man Action Center. So it will take time to establish process, coordinate among members, to define the national man action standards, to establish priorities. So, as you said, we've got teams capacity in the northeast of Syria and across all the country. The problem today is not that we don't have this capacity, is that this capacity is not entirely unlocked. Again, as as this process continues to be defined at national level, it could be worried that the worry could be that this process takes time and slows the deployment of the team down on the ground, right? There are still today uncertainties about access, uncertainties about procedure, which differs between governorate, whether in northeast of Syria or in other governorate in Syria. So the risk is that operations are slowing down, delay in response, and we cannot afford this. The figures in terms of number of accidents speak for themselves. We've got 20 to 30 accidents per week, which is a very critical number. So while a solid coordination mechanism, a solid national mine action center is being established, we also need to ensure that in parallel, boots are on the ground. I recall, we can take the example of the city of Raqqa. Raqqa is a quite large city in the northeast of Syria. And if it was not for the teams being deployed on the ground, for the land being released, large part of the city will still be uninhabitable. And so HMA in this context is not only like a technical achievement, but again, as we keep saying, an enabler to returns, an enabler to recovery. And this is the situation today in Syria. What I want to say is like that is the level of impact, and maybe in terms of moving forward, we should be clear in what's needed. And I think the priority is to keep the existing momentum when it comes to establish a strong national mine action authority. We had a very successful strategy workshop, I think it was last week in Damascus, with the support of GICHD, UNMAS, and we can see that things are going to take place, things are happening. All of us, I think, around the room, as whether operators or other stakeholders, we are keen to invest in supporting the capacity development of the NMAC, and this should be done. We've got excellent example in the region. I'll speak for Lebanon. I know a bit the context there, where that investing in National Man Action Authority is a proven success for operational efficiency. And so what we also need to keep in mind is that while this is being done, we should also ensure that in parallel, we unlock this capacity. We ensure that it runs along the ability for operators to deploy on the ground. And I think boots on the ground while the systems are being established is essential.
I couldn't agree more. And I think maybe I want to test whether Bakhtiar is online and can hop in, because the national organizations have also played quite a significant role. All of them, the majority of them indeed have been based in northeast Syria and have still really both supported the international partners but also independently done quite a lot of work on mine action in Syria. I want to check whether Bakhtiar is online and if he can chime in. Bakhtiar?
شكرا جزيلا. سوف أتكلم بالعربية إذا من فضلك أضع السماعات. هل تستطيعون السماع الآن؟ هل الصوت واضح؟
I'm sorry, Bakhtiar, I had to go and grab translation because
هل تسمعونني يا سادة؟
We can hear you perfectly. Thank you so much, Bakhtiar. I wanted to follow up with you actually and double check how was the operational environment for the national mine action
لا أستطيع
actors,
سماعكم. هل
and how is it now?
وصولي إلى الصوت؟
We hear you perfectly. Please go ahead, Bakhtiar.
Yes, okay. شكرا لكم السيدات والسادة الزملاء الكرام. يسعدني أن أشارككم هذا النقاش في توقيت بالغ الأهمية لقطاع الأعمال المتعلقة بمخلفات الحرب في سوريا عموما. خلال الفترة الماضية شهدنا تطورات إيجابية من حيث الوصول وبناء الأطر، ولكننا من منظور المؤسسات الوطنية هناك ازدياد طلب مجتمعي بشكل واضح وكبير ومتزايد، ولكن ليس هنالك مشكلة في ذلك. فهناك جاهزية تشغيلية، إنما لدينا قيود أخرى كقيود التمويل والتسجيل. على سبيل المثال غالبا ما يتم تسجيلنا ضمن قطاعات غير مرتبطة بإزالة الألغام، مما يحصر دورنا إلى حد كبير في التوعية بمخاطر الألغام رغم امتلاكنا لكوادر مدربة ووصول فعال إلى المجتمعات وسنوات من الخبرة في دعم أنشطة المسح والتطهير بالتعاون مع المنظمات الدولية. ولكن لحسن الحظ في الورشة الأخيرة التي أقامتها GICHD مشكورة في دمشق التقينا على هامشها الزملاء في المركز الوطني وأكدوا لنا أن هذه الإجراءات سوف تحل في أقرب فرصة. ولكن هناك فجوة أود أن ننوه إليها، فجوة في التصور. لا تزال هناك هذه الفجوة، ينظر أحيانا إلى المنظمات الوطنية على أنها أقل كفاءة، في حين أن العديد من فرقنا تعمل في مجال إزالة الألغام منذ سنوات، وغالبا ما كانت مندمجة ضمن برامج تقودها منظمات دولية. هذه القدرات ليست نظرية، إنها قدرات سورية مكتسبة من الخبرة وستبقى في سوريا. ما ينقصنا فعلا هو ليس التدريب بل الاعتراف والموائمة المؤسسية. إن فتح المجال أمام هذه القدرات الوطنية يعد من أسرع السبل لتوسيع نطاق التغطية، لا سيما في المناطق صعب الوصول إليها. لأننا ريتش أوت وكذلك زملائي في المنظمات والمؤسسات الوطنية هناك ميزة نسبية واضحة تتمثل في الثقة، فالمجتمعات تتفاعل معنا بسرعة وبشغفية أكثر، ونتلقى منها بلاغات مباشرة أحيانا وحاسمة لدقة المسح وتحديد الأولويات وضمان السلامة. في العديد من المواقع يصل الطلب المجتمعي إلى المنظمات الوطنية، إلا أن قدرتنا على الاستجابة بشكل فعال تظل مقيدة بنطاق الأنشطة المسموح لنا بتنفيذها رسميا، وكذلك في التحديات التمويل، لأن تحديات التمويل لا تقتصر فقط على حجم الموارد بل على إمكانية الوصول إليها. حتى في الحالات التي توفر فيها تمويل مخصص لإزالة الألغام تواجه المنظمات والمؤسسات الوطنية عوائق بنيوية، فئات تسجيل غير ملائمة، غموض في إجراءات الاعتماد، وشروط أهلية تقصينا فعليا. ينتج عن ذلك حالة من عدم الكفاءة، حيث تبقى القدرات معطلة في وقت تتزايد فيه الاحتياجات، وخصوصا في المنطقة التي كنا نعمل فيها ونعمل فيها الآن في شمال وشرق سوريا. وبعد الأحداث الأخيرة فقد ازداد الاحتياج بشكل كبير، ونتلقى بلاغات دورية في المناطق الملوثة. ونرى أخيرا من نظريتنا لا تتماشى عملية تحديد الأولويات دائما مع مستوى المخاطر الفعلية التي تواجهها المجتمعات. فبعض المناطق ذات التلوث العالي وتأتينا منه بلاغات، ولكن ظهورها السياسي والبرامجي محدود، تظل محرومة من الخدمات رغم وجود أدلة واضحة على تعرض المدنيين للخطر. في الخاتمة أريد أن أقول لا نطالب بتخفيض المعايير كمنظمات محلية ووطنية، بل نطالب بأطر عادلة ومنصفة. نحن مستعدون للقيام بالمزيد، والمجتمعات تطلب منا أن نفعل المزيد، والخطوة التالية هي ضمان أن يسمح لنا بذلك. فإذا كان الهدف هو التوسع والاستدامة والملكية الوطنية، فإن تمكين الفاعلين والوطنيين في مجال إزالة الألغام ليس خيارا الآن بل ضرورة أساسية. وشكرا لكم.
Thank you, Bakhtiar. I think really you portrayed well in some of the also key challenges for the national mine action organizations. I think one of the key structural ones is really the registration, because the national mine action organizations actually register with the Ministry for Social Affairs and Labor in Syria and actually do not have a box to tick what to register on. So we are really working hard with the National Mine Action Center on that. To change that, because now the majority of national partners are registered under a different sector, for example, education. So they are doing explosive ordnance risk education, are limited at present to that. But having taken a look at how things were when Syria was divided, we now have the National Mine Action Center as one common denominator for all of us. And I hand it over to you, Mr. Fadi, to give us a bit of a picture about the situation at the National Mine Action Center and how have things worked so far.
السلام عليكم. نحن هلا بعد مرور عام من العمل بملف الألغام في سوريا، نحن الصراحة لازم نكون واقعيين وصادقين. احنا لتاريخ هاي اللحظة ما فينا نقول انه كمركز وطني، طبعا نحن عندنا بيانات وعندنا معلومات وعندنا كل النقاط اللي بدنا نناقشها بالطريقة الصحيحة. هذا الشيء اذا نحن ادعيناه من البداية نحن رح نكون فاشلين. صح نحن عم نشوف انه عرض معلومات وبيانات، لكن هي مانا انه تكون وطنية. ما فينا نقول انه هي مجموعة بطريقة انه يعني فيها متابعة، لكن هي مفيدة جدا في هاي الأوقات. هي كتير بتنقذنا بهاي المراحل. احنا صرنا ما يقارب 6 أشهر لإنشاء المركز تقريبا. حتى نحن موضوع التوظيف عم نحاول يكون بطيء مشان نفهم العمل، التنظيم، يكون الأشخاص اللي بده يدخلوا معنا بالعمل ياخذوا دورهم بالطريق الصحيح. مثل ما تفضلت من شوي الآنسة عايدة، قالت إنه نحن بعد فترة رح نعمل مثلا المعايير. الصراحة محتمل نحن نأجل المعايير. نحن ما رح نظهر المعايير أو نتفق على وضع المعايير إلا لنفهم الصياغة السوري بالطريقة الصحيحة، ولو أن نحن سوريين. لكن ملف الألغام هو ملف مختلف عن كل البرامج، عن كل الأعمال اللي قمنا فيها. لهيك نحن عملنا تجارب. هي التجارب طبعا عملنا تجارب بمشاركة هالو تراست والاي سي ار سي، وفي تجربة رح نعملها بالمستقبل هلا في تجهيز لها مع ماج والام بي اي. نحن من خلال التجربة اللي عملناها، احنا ما عملنا التجربة مشان نقول والله نحن عملنا انجاز رائع، عملنا تطهير ارض بسرعة، لا، احنا مشان نقدر نبند او نفند المعايير السورية بالطريقة الصحيحة. نحن مثلا اكتشفنا بالتجربة انه المعدات بهالو تراست لما انتقلت من مكان عمل الى مكان عمل استطاع تحقيق اثر في منطقة بطريقة رائعة. يعني انه العمل في المكان بيحتاج اختصاص. لنفرض انه مثلا منظمة مثلا الام بي اي راحت تشتغل مكان مثلا بيشتغلوا الاتش اي بالمسطحات المائية. أنا بقول ما رح تأبدع مثل الاتش اي، صح؟ لهيك نحن عم نقول نحن عم نطبق هاي الاختبارات نحن مشان نوصل انه عمل المنظمة مثلا هلو هي بتقدر تأدي أداء لنقول 100% إذا كانت في هاي المنطقة. هلو تراست بتقدم هون أفضل، ماج بتقدم هون أفضل. طبعا نحن الغاية انه نحقق اثر كلياتنا باسرع وقت ممكن. نحن ما لنا ضمنانين انه يصير في دعم قوي او تمويل قوي او طويل الامد لسوريا. لهيك انه نحن عم ننفذ هاي التجارب مشان نحن يكون تجربتنا بسوريا معاكم كلياتكم تكون ناجحة ومميزة. مثل ما بتعرفوا في منطقة اسمها سد تشرين، نحن هلا حاليا عم نعمل عليها التجربة. رح اوصف لكم الوضع. القرية قبل ما تدخل عليها ملغمة بالكامل. بتدخل للبيوت، الباب البيوت ملغم، الخزانات داخل البيوت ملغمة، البراد ملغم، الشباك ملغم. شيء خطير جدا وملغمة بأشكال ألوان. هذا الوضع الهجين الموجود بسوريا صراحة بيحتاج لأخصائيين. يعني أنا لازم المنظمات الفاعلة تختص لحتى تحقق أثر. يمكن أنا لحد اللحظة أنه ما عم أقدر مثلا حدد مين الشخص اللي بده يدخل على منطقة سد تشرين لينفذ هذا العمل. لهيك الصراحة الوضع بسوريا بيحتاج لاجتماعات كتير ونقاش كتير، وبدكم تتحملونا قدر المستطاع. إذا نحن لما منوه على أنه نطلب من المنظمة بالاسم كذا تساعدنا بالمنطقة كذا، نحن بدها تكون رؤيتنا أنه نحن وياهم منحقق أثر أسرع وأكبر في هذه المنطقة. في يعني هلا إذا في مقطع فيديو،
We couldn't load it. We could not load it before. We couldn't. It came late, unfortunately.
طيب كان في مقطع فيديو أنا بدي أفرجيكم عليه. يعني أنا الصراحة ما حابب أعرضه، بس يعني لازم نشوفه كلياتنا. بيفرجيك إنه الوضع بسوريا كارثي مأساوي، شيء لا يوصف. في بالمقاطع الفيديو بالريلزات بسوريا. طبعا هذا انا ما فيني اسحبه واعرضه، يعني أنا مخالف للقوانين الدولية، لكن الاطفال عم ينزعوا الغام وناس عم بتصورن كأبطال. هذا الشيء يعني انا ما عم استرجي اشوفه. يعني فكيف انا بدي اقدر اجي اعرض لكم اياه؟ فالصراحه الوضع بسوريا خطير جدا جدا جدا. ما فينا نضل نقول انه نحن فقط هو خطير. يعني نحن بدنا نحقق اثر لوقف حالات الوفيات والاصابات، وخاصه انه نحن وصلنا لنسبه فوق 40% من الاطفال بسوريا بالاصابات. أنا بتشكركم كتير على سماعي، وبعتذر لأنه أنا طولت عليكم، لكن أنا حابب أنقل لكم وضع سوريا بالطريقة الصحيحة والوضع اللي نحن عم نفكر فيه. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you, Mr. Fadi. Indeed, this battle is not going to take. It's not going to be done in a very short period of time. It's going to take a long time for all of us to get somewhere. I'm originally Bosnian. My country experienced war in the 90s. We are still struggling with clearance of unexploded ordnance. It's not to say that we cannot make progress, but it is to say that there are different things to consider, and we need to all step up. I wanted to actually revert now to some of our colleagues in the audience, because we have partners lined up coming actually from Syria. And I wanted to revert back a little bit and discuss, call out on humanity and inclusion, and the country director, Daniela Zizi, who is sitting in the audience today with us. Maybe to discuss a little bit what, from both an operational and victim assistance perspective, and I know HI does not necessarily need to be stamped as a victim assistance organization only, but rather as an organization doing comprehensive programming on mine action. I wanted to ask you then also from the VA perspective, what are the most critical bottlenecks today to continue operations, both operational and VA?
Thank you very much, Aida. I think that some of the constraints that my colleagues explained do not need to be repeated. Of course, the context before the end of 2024 was quite restrict. HI was operating only in the Northeast, as many other operators. They could not expand any type of operation aside from risk education in any other area of Syria. Definitely something that actually that was detrimental for the population. The situation has changed consistently in 2025, and we have seen more and more access. I think that if I have to name some bottlenecks very quickly to let also my colleagues complement, we have the bottlenecks of having multiple authorities actually giving permits for deployment. It means that deployment is delayed on the ground sometimes, involuntarily, of course, but this is a reality, operational reality that we have to deal with. There is also a structural impediment. There are certain areas of Syria that do not have the necessary trauma unit, trauma care that allow full deployment of teams. It means that we are not within the 1 hour, one golden hour, to make the deployment for our own team safe, or safe enough to operate. This is another bottleneck that is something that we are still seeing in Syria. The last bottleneck is the human cost. The human cost is absolutely outstanding. I mean, you have gave the number at the beginning of the presentation, but those numbers equal people. And the survivors do not have access to a continuum of care. Well, in some cases, frankly speaking, do not even have access to a trauma stabilization unit on the spot, especially in rural areas. I mean, someone will mention for sure the travel season in Deir ez-Zor is quite critical, the situation. The same is Abu Kamal. So if the accident occurred there, it means that people may not rush to the hospital on time. And when they do rush to the hospital on time, what happens to them afterwards? Afterwards, you need to guarantee the continuum of care to make sure that there is no permanent disability, or when permanent disability is developed, there are means that ensure for the individual a reintegration in the community. And that is the only thing that breaks the dependence of aid and establish and support the recovery of the country. Over.
Thank you, Danila. I think we've had a number of situations actually across Syria with different partners. We're asked to support various health organizations to do the clearance of health facilities, and then there was no access to trauma care for the teams, and yet there was no access to trauma care for the patients and for the people affected. So we had this chicken and egg situation where you cannot deploy teams to an area where there's no trauma care, and yet people are getting killed and are getting injured and not having access to trauma care either, because we are not able to enable reconstruction of health facilities. So I wanted to then also throw the question to the Dan Church Aid and the country director, Knud Andersen, who is also sitting in the audience. So where do you see this biggest gap between available capacity and the ability to deploy the teams on the ground?
Yeah, thank you. Well, as we can see from the pictures and what we hear from the panel here, I mean, the capacity is there, the teams are there, the local partners are there, and it's great to see an emerging group of strong partners that are bringing a lot of experience and contextual knowledge in. I think it's also important to emphasize when we look at those pictures, the teams that are doing the work on the ground are Syrian nationals. And long may it last and may it continue, because as Mr. Fadi also have very emphatically emphasized, was that the needs are overwhelming, and it will take a very long time to achieve a mine-free Syria. The capacity needs to be in country, and it's important for us to remember that in the solutions that we find. And I want to also commend Mr. Fadia and his department for having facilitated such an inclusive environment where there is room for all the actors, bringing all the actors to the table from the different regions, regardless of any previous political affiliations. I think that's a milestone in making sure that we bring a joint effort to the table there. Of course, there are still challenges. There are still delays with permissions and these kind of things. But again, we have benefited from a National Mine Action Center that really takes a strong interest in bringing the partners back on the ground and removing any obstacles. Some of us have already benefited from that support, and there are other actors also standing ready to support if those obstacles are removed. There are other things like lack of clarity on clearance and practicalities around clearance. Mr. Fadi gave a really good example of how important it is to look at each of our respective organizations as implementing partners, looking at our strengths, looking at the capacities we have. Some of us do mechanical clearance, some do urban clearance, and some have capacities with the various detection methods. And it's crucial that there is a coordinating effort where those strengths are being played to. And then, of course, one of the big ones is now we are seeing in May, hopefully we will see the mine action standards being developed. Very much looking forward to taking part in that process as well, where we can also address some of these issues around, for instance, storage and what do we do in terms of sourcing explosives, so we can really, really ramp up on the clearance, because the capacity is there. It's more about the enabling environment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Knud. Absolutely correct, and really something that that will continue progressing, and both National Mine Action Center and partners together will continue working on that. I wanted to double check whether we have Dilshad from ITF chiming in from Kamishli, I believe. Dilshad, I see you and Chris are online as well. So I wanted to double check with you and wanted to ask you from a system and financing perspective, what would be the most helpful thing to help enable scale up of operations? Over to you.
So hello everyone. Thank you very much. This is Dilshad Yusuf from ITF. I'm the project manager. Thank you all for this great opportunity and for this year, the focus on Syria. I'm also joined here by my colleague,
Chris Williams and Seb Gretton, who's off screen, so apologies for that.
Yeah. The thing is, when it comes to financing, I think the most important and one of the challenges that we face is the interruptions in funding streams. And this poses a great danger to the sustainable long-term impact. So, we are, somehow blessed having Chris here, and he has done a great job when it comes to capacity building, our teams. And I think in the core, he very much understands how sustainable, funding is very important for this capacity building. So I will pass on the floor to him to maybe provide us with more information.
Thank you, Dilshad, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What we've actually done, you've already heard from our colleague Bakhtar Hassan, our localization partner at Reach Out, and we've effectively just sort of canvassed opinion, discussed this exam question, if you like. So I'm going to read out the statement, which is our collective sort of observations, if you'll allow me to do so. So the issue is about stability versus uncertainty. When funding is short-term, and when I say short-term, I mean 6 months to 12-month funding. When it's short-term and unpredictable, the project's often forced into a reactive mode, constantly starting, stopping, and adjusting. That kind of environment makes it difficult to plan ahead, and it makes it especially difficult to retain skilled teams or invest in the structures needed for scale. Even when operational capacity exists, it can't be fully utilised because the conditions around it are unstable. Now, I know this is going to be slightly sort of controversial, and I've been in the humanitarian sector long enough to know when we talk about funding, and we talk about multi-year funding, everybody bolts. But if you could perhaps humour me, if we could shift to a multi-year funding model, if you like, predictable financing changes the dynamic from reactive to strategic. It gives organisations the confidence to plan immediate cycles, whether that's maintaining trained staff, investing in equipment, or strengthening partnerships. Instead of repeatedly rebuilding momentum, efforts can build progressively over time, which is essential for scaling any operation. This kind of predictability also improves efficiency. Resources are used more effectively when activities can be sequenced properly rather than compressed into short funding windows. It reduces duplication, lowers transaction costs, and allows for trust, both within our teams and across our partners, because there is a shared expectation of continuity, and therefore we can deliver on our promises. So in simple terms, scale depends not only on how much funding is available, but how reliable those funding streams are. Even without large increases in total funding, making it more predictable can significantly improve outcomes by enabling systems to function as intended, rather than constantly adapting to uncertainty. So that's really our answer to the exam question. Dilshan, anything else to add?
You know, I think, Ida, we during our last workshop in Damascus, one of the approaches was to build projects on results-based management, and to make sure that we have that efficient project. I think it has to be a long-term project or multi-year project, I would say, to have that teams very well capacity built ones. So yeah, as Chris very much enforced, we need long-term financing fundings.
So maybe it's an approach to the donors and see if we can potentially change the way we do things and optimise them. And even if it's 18 months funding streams or 2-year funding streams, it would make a significant difference, I think, in Syria especially.
Thank you, Dilshad, and thank you, Chris. It absolutely is true, and I think nicely into this comes in really the discussion on the integration of mine action with other sectors, and the funding that is available being actually usable for such integration of different sectors. One of the experts on this, apart from DCA, is also DRC, that has been doing a lot of integration of mine action programming with other sectors. So I wanted to revert to DRC a little bit to discuss a bit on the integration of mine action with other recovery sectors. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Ida, and yeah, thanks for bringing us all together, international, national actors. I think it's great that there is, unity in the sector and we're all working together. As you said, I think it's important to highlight HMA as the enabler for recovery, but also how it is embedded in the broader humanitarian and recovery sector. I think we all know that explosive ordnance is not only a protection risk, as was highlighted in the latest humanitarian needs and response plan, but it also is one of the main structural barriers to recovery in Syria. So where explosive ordnance remains, recovery cannot and often does not really happen. And I think this is especially critical in a country where 72% of communities rely on agriculture and livestock, and where the majority of explosive ordnance incidents occur in agricultural areas, as you said in the beginning, and we noticed from the data from you and also from INSO. And also, according to our latest DRC needs assessments, around 1/3 of families in parts of Dara and rural Damascus report taking longer routes to take their children to school to avoid suspected contamination. And this, in turn, obviously results in higher fuel costs for these families, more time spent in transportation, and also obviously in additional expenses for those families, putting an additional burden on already strained resources of many families and communities in Syria. At DRC in Syria, we try to, and we are integrating as much as possible, following an area-based approach, mine action with other recovery sectors. So we're integrating all mine action pillars within mine action, but we're also integrating mine action with other recovery sectors such as protection, livelihoods, WASH, infrastructure initiatives. And at the same time, it's also important to mention that we need also to mainstream and integrate mine action and other recovery sectors with housing, land, and property rights. So this is what we're doing across the whole land release process, where we try to identify HLP risks and try to basically resolve those HLP risks before a clearance takes place, so that we make sure that that land that is cleared, buildings that are cleared, are handed over to the rightful owners, so that there are no social cohesion risks in the end. Just maybe to end, really, because funding has been obviously mentioned quite a lot. I looked a little bit up the numbers, and in 2022, and Ida, you will know this better than anybody else, but in 2022, 7% of the mine action needs were met. Obviously, this might have had to do with the political situation in the country, but then you see that in 2024, around only 13% of the needs in the mine action center were met, making it one of the most, or the most underfunded humanitarian recovery sectors in Syria. According to the latest HNRP, there is a need of $75 million. I think it's fair to say that we're far away from actually reaching this goal. So this really highlights, as we've all been saying, and I think the colleagues were also saying online, the need for not only multi-year funding, but also predictable, reliable funding, so that we can take on this task that we're all working on together here in Syria. But I also agree with Mr. Fadi as well that we need to act fast, because obviously lives are at stake on a daily basis. However, again, in parallel, we need to make sure that we create those structures in the long term, build capacities, work on innovation, and make sure that we're as cost efficient as possible in the sector. So in the end, integration is what creates impact within the mine action pillars, but also and especially with other recovery sectors in the humanitarian system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I wanted to also denote, I mean, we have only a few minutes left, and I really want to have also Ronnie from Ramco, as well as Paula and Saleh from Safeland. But before that, indeed, just to pick up on what Jacob was saying just before, mine action remains the most underfunded sector in the entire Syria response. This is a fact. And we have long also been advocating to donors to please push other partners from other sectors to include mine action components, simply for the fact that they keep calling us and our partners to intervene. And partners are doing it on their own dime or already existing funding. I think providing this support, it would be absolutely essential so that partners can deploy teams to support other sectors. Doesn't mean that they will not do it without the funding either, but still, funding remains one of the most critical issues in Syria. And so while we have this little funding, I wanted to go to Safeland and to Paula Garcia, who is working with Safeland, one of the national partners. When we have this little funding, how do we prioritize in that sense? How do we select where to go and what to do, having also in mind that it bears on a conscience if we leave out one and not help the other. How do we do that, Paula?
Hi, thank you, Aida. So I think this is the tricky part, right? Like what ends up happening is that areas that are hard to reach are less prioritized, because it's just by definition harder to get there and also more costly. And apart from being the issue also of remote areas might have poorer security and less health services, etc. So I think that's one of the consequences.
Paula, you muted yourself.
I'm sorry, apologies. And I think another issue is that we are having is that, local NGOs I think are one of the ones that are struggling the most with funding and with sustainable funding and long-term funding that not also fund our activities but also our core cost. because as national organizations, we also, I find that we struggle with that. And I also feel that we get a lot of ad hoc requests that we are forced to respond to because they are needed for the implementation of projects. But sometimes we don't have the funds to do that. And what ends up happening is that a lot of national NGOs, including ourselves, we end up doing a lot of this on our own budget, or asking our staff to work on a volunteer basis, which is really, amazing of them that they are willing to do that, but it shouldn't be the case. So those are my main contributions. I don't know if you will have more questions on that regard.
Thank you, Paula. I think this is really a general agreement by all partners who have experienced that. Thanks so much, Paula. But even within, I wanted to go to Ronnie very briefly from the Roge Mine Control Organization. Even with this caveat, and thinking about how to coordinate even those little interventions that one can do as a national NGO, and how to go about it. Can I ask you, Ronnie, to discuss this a little bit? What has been your constraints for the minute, and what are we looking in the future for Aramco?
شكرا عايدة، شكرا لك وتحية لجميع الزملاء. حقيقة من واقع عملنا كمنظمة وطنية في قطاع الألغام الإنساني بما يقارب تقريبا 10 سنوات. خلال هذه السنوات عملنا شراكات ناجحة مع أغلب الجهات الوطنية والدولية كمنظمات في مناطق شمال وشرق سوريا، وطورنا خبرات تشغيلية على الأرض. لدينا فرق تمتلك خبرات عالية في السياق المحلي، إضافة إلى مستوى عالي من القبول في المجتمع المحلي، وخاصة الوصول إلى المناطق المتأثرة والمناطق عالية الخطورة. نرى أن التحدي الحالي لا يرتبط بغياب القدرات فعليا بل بكيفية تمكين هذه القدرات وتفعيلها ضمن الإطار الوطني. لكن في المرحلة الحالية لا تزال هناك فجوة واضحة بين هذه القدرات وبين القدرة الفعلية المتاحة لتنفيذ الاستجابة التقنية. الإطار المتاح بالوقت الحالي يسمح لنا بالوصول للمجتمعات بتنفيذ أنشطة توعية بناء على الرخصة المتاحة، لكن حقيقة لا تمكننا من تنفيذ الأنشطة التقنية اللازمة لتحديد حجم التلوث من أنشطة MTS أو TS أو المساهمة في معالجتها عن طريق التطهير. وهذا يحد من تحويل المعرفة الميدانية إلى أثر عملي. كما أضيف هناك تحديات متعلقة بالترخيص ومتطلبات العمل، وحقيقة هو كان المؤثر الأكبر على أنشطتنا بالذات وقدرتنا على استئنافها في مناطق عملنا السابقة في القانون الثاني التي توقفت، مثل محافظة دير الزور والرقم، علما أن الحاجة تتزايد كما ذكر السيد غادي، ولدينا القدرة على الوصول لتوفر الظروف المناسبة في الأيام القادمة. لذلك نرى الأولوية العملية في هذه المرحلة تتمثل في إشراك الجهات الوطنية بشكل فعلي للمساعدة في التنسيق وفي التخطيط، وبناء خطط استجابة أكثر فعالية تعتمد على بيانات محدثة للتلوث والواقع الميداني الحالي، ووضوح أكبر في الإجراءات لدعم الجاهزية التشغيلية وإتاحة تفعيل القدرات الموجودة في الوسط المحلي والدولي بتحسين هذه الروابط على أمل نستطيع بناء قدرة تساعدنا على التنسيق مع قطاعات أخرى مثل سبل العيش وإعادة التأهيل يمكن أن تعزز الاستجابة ويجعلها أكثر استدامة في كل القطاعات.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. It's really good to hear from you. Before I actually hand it over to Mr. Fadi to conclude, can I put on spot Joe McCartan from UNMAS to tell us just briefly, I'm sorry that this is taking such a long time. We also had so many other points to discuss, but the discussion took a longer time. Could I ask you, Joe, to please give us a few sort of key things that UNMAS has planned for the coming period, and what is the priority of UNMAS?
Thanks, Ada, and thanks, colleagues. I think the UNMAS main effort really is the capacity building of the National Mine Action Centre. We have to ensure that this is a completely Syrian-led process to a Syrian problem. And that means that we are going to be working with international partners, including GICHD, but also with partners in Syria. And it is going to be a long and complex process, but what is heartening is that the Syrian National Mine Action Centre are incredibly willing partners in this process and in Syria. I think Chris raised it in his little vignette at the start, the difference between operating in Syria now and operating in Syria under the previous regime is night and day. I'd really emphasize that point. Thanks, Ada.
Thank you so much, Joe. I wanted to get back to you, Mr. Fadi, to give us a few more words of your wisdom and what are the ways forward now with the National Mine Action Center, but also for mine action in Syria. Over to you.
هلا إذا بدنا نحكي بحكمة لنهاية الاجتماع، أنا بقول إنه نحن كلياتنا لازم نتحلى بموضوع الصبر، يعني ما حدا يفكر إنه مثلاً إنه المركز الوطني هو بده غايته ما يرخص أو ما يساعد أو يعرقل، مستحيل. إحنا بنتمنى تشتغلوا اليوم قبل بكرة بأسرع وقت ممكن. هذا الشيء أنا يعني حتى أنا وقعت فيه. أنا أول ما تعرفت على جو باليو إن ماس إنه أنا أحكي معه، يعني أطلب مثلا مواضيع يسرع لي إياها، فهو يتباطأ ويقول لي نستنى شوي، عمهل شوي، نستنى شوي. فأنا وصلت لمرحلة إنه أنا صرت إنه ما أحب شوف جو. لبعد فترة كان جو بالفعل عم يقصد كلامه بطريق منظم صحيح. فأنا تسرعت، لمت جو، لكن كان جو أوعى مني بهذا الأمر. فأنا بعتذر من جو مرة تانية، وهلأ هو صديقي الشيخ جو. شكرا جزيلا، بتمنى التوفيق للجميع.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Fadi, and we're really all looking forward to working very, very closely with the National Mine Action Center in Syria. I see as well that the room is pretty much emptied because they put us strategically before the lunch break, so people just went hungry. But I just wanted to relay a couple of final messages very briefly. That the progress in Syria is real and it's taking place, but it's uneven. And we need to get patience, both from all of the sides. So I agree absolutely, Mr. Fadi. We all need to have patience. We understand that the National Mine Action Center is still young, and we are offering our support. So you have definitely support from all the partners in the room and online. At the same time, we wanted to really appeal to the donors and remind them that mine action remains the most underfunded sector in the entire humanitarian response, and yet everything hinges on it, really. The destruction in Syria is massive. And then we wanted to also remind the donors that you don't have to give us money all by yourselves. You can also ask other partners to include mine action components in their project proposals, because they will need us. We know that, and we get that every day. Thank you so very much.